July 4th, Independence Day. The year 1776, Declaration of Independence of the United States of America, the first institutionalized free democracy. Up to that point, nations and empires were ruled by monarchs, by despots, by church leaders, by dictators, by fascists, some of them totalitarian and cruel. And once in a while we were lucky and we had a benevolent leader. But the idea of a government for the people, by the people, where rights, human rights, are a sacred foundation of the entire country, was first established on July 4th. And that's why it's a day worth remembering and commemorating. So beyond the fireworks and the sales and the different movies, Independence Days and so on, and all the entertainment around it, it's a very serious and a very important day in that sense. So let's talk about that a bit. One of the most fascinating documents that you'll ever see is the Declaration of Independence. In it, the Founding Fathers establish that we find these truths to be self-evident, and they include that all men are created equal, endowed by the Creator with inalienable rights. The right of freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly. I always found fascinating that they use the word created and creator twice. Created equal and created. They could have easily, to avoid the whole issue of separation of church and state, said all men are equal, are born equal, and don't have to use the word creator endowed us with these rights. I've asked many legal scholars, constitutional ones, and I never got a satisfying answer. Here's my thought on the topic. It actually came to me when I was reading a book called On Two Wings by Michael Novak, a scholar, and the subtitle of one of the chapters there is the basis, the foundation of this country on Torah metaphysics. And there, not theories, he quotes letters and correspondence from all the Founding Fathers, John Adams and Jefferson and Madison and Paine and Washington and others, where they all explain where they got the roots of the ideas of establishing this country. And essentially it's from the biblical principle that every human being was created in the divine image. But why do they need to use the word created? They were deists. But they did not want to impose any religion. As a matter of fact, that's part of the Constitution, is that this country will never impose, it will never designate any religion. It's freedom of religion. You can choose any religion you like. And there's no such thing as being discriminated because of religion. So, why do they use the word created? My thinking came as well from reading an insurance policy. This is a boilerplate insurance policy. A homeowner's insurance policy, which talks about what the insurance covers. It covers certain damage, fire, other things that happen. But then what about natural disasters? A hurricane, an earthquake, a volcano. So there's a clause in most insurance policies that say it does not cover natural disasters and any other acts of God. It uses the word God. Why would you use the word God? Why not just say acts of nature? So here I remember hearing from an attorney, because if you say acts of nature, it still leaves open the debate, who's responsible for nature? The owner or the insurance company? Whereas you say God, everyone knows God is God's fault. No one else can be blamed. He's the ultimate scapegoat. So it comes to economics, suddenly God is very convenient. So I'm thinking similarly, on a positive note, and a less humorous note, what the Founding Fathers recognized was, if you want to have an absolute certainty that no one can ever take away these freedoms, you have to attribute these freedoms to an entity that is beyond reproach, beyond argument. If you said all men are born equal, or all men are equal, you could say, okay, but maybe some are more equal than others. But once you say created, we all know we didn't create ourselves. It means that there's a higher power. And that guarantees that no human being, no group, no majority can come and say, oh, you know what? Everyone's equal except this group, this minority, or this individual. Because it's endowed by the Creator. It gives it an absolute value. So it's not about advocating and pushing religion, it's about a wisdom, which I found to be quite impressive. And with that, you have guaranteed that this country would protect the interests and the rights of every one of us. Even the right to be an atheist. I once asked an atheist I know, more than one, I said, if an atheist had written this document, would he have given the right to a religious person to be religious as much as a person who's writing that God endowed us? And he laughed. He said, maybe not, because we would laugh at it and say that's for imbeciles, faith and religion. So it's interesting. It's so sacred that the right for you to not want to believe is also guaranteed, that right that you have, because it's endowed to you by your Creator. So going back to July 4th, if you think of the value of that, is it unbelievable. It means another tremendous concept, that it created an environment in this country where people would be cherished, would be respected for who they are, no matter who you are, because you're created equal. You're in the divine image, without using that expression. That means you matter, absolutely. The term I often use in my book, Torah Meaning for Life, birth is God saying you matter. You're indispensable. That creates an environment that people will be valued. You come into a country where they say, oh, you know what, only if you're Muslim, you really are official. Or only Christian, or only Jewish for that matter, or only something. But everybody, so then you're welcoming all types of people and encouraging them and actually creating the ability to cultivate their talents. So I would argue that the economic success of this experiment called the United States, that began on July 4th, is not because it says anywhere we want to create economic opportunity, equal opportunity. No, give people that value and don't discriminate against them based on their faith or race or whatever it may be, because they're all equal. They will then thrive. They will spread their wings and create and be innovative and create the most amazing technologies and industries that you can imagine. That's the foundation of success of the United States. As soon as you oppress people, even if it's just a minority, it cannot last. The oppression will ultimately come back to haunt you. Look at Germany. Germany was very advanced, but the technology considered cultural. But as soon as the oppression began, first it was Jews, and then gypsies, and then homosexuals, and then this minority and that minority. It was a matter of time. Everybody can be oppressed. That is not an environment that's going to create a freedom, a flow of ideas, a freedom of expression, the ability to experiment and innovate, because it's always going to be driven by fear. Who knows when they're coming after you because someone doesn't like you and because it's driven by power and control. So this country is far from perfect, but that foundational element is absolutely, in my view, a divine revelation that the founding fathers had. And that is July 4th at its essence. And how many countries since the founding of the United States have emulated that, meaning creating similar constitutions. I also find it fascinating. We'll get to that. We'll get to a point to another point in a moment. That this is also psychologically tremendously powerful. The idea that you have absolute value. I can tell you from counseling many people, from seeing the pains, the loss of time and energy and money due to people's fears and insecurities and traumas and loss, all coming down to one thing, not feeling inner value. So you're always looking for it elsewhere. You're looking for validation. When parents don't give their children that type of absolute validation, absolute reinforcement of their value by criticizing them, by knocking them, by dismissing them, by not being there, that is the root, I would say, of most psychological problems. I'm not talking about clinical now, based on other factors. Because a human being needs to feel that I matter. I need to feel valuable. So by saying all people are created equal, and I'm using the word people, just to make sure men means men and women and everyone, all people are created equal, you're saying that you are of absolute value. You know what kind of statement that is? It means you matter. You're not some blip on the screen. You're not some statistic on someone's balance sheet. You're not a grain of sand on a beach of billions or trillions of grains of sand. You absolutely matter. I don't know if that was their intention, the Founding Fathers, but it definitely is a derivative of this concept, which means it gives you the absolute value. I find it even more fascinating. Look, many of the Founding Fathers were slave owners. They contradicted the very statement they wrote in the Declaration of Independence. Here were human beings that happened to be black, and they treated them like subhuman, half human, a half a person, a quarter of a person, whatever it was, those obscene calculations. So how did they do that? So they justified it by saying blacks are really not all men. All men are created, but they're not men. But the interesting thing is that they built in their own very system that which would undermine their own industries, the slave industry, that ultimately couldn't stand because they put in a truth that at the time maybe they did realize or did not realize would undermine their very slave ownership. Because all people are created equal. You have no right to own someone else. You have no right to repress them, to control them, to take away their freedom and their rights. So though it came with a lot of pain, and I'm not in any way deifying or glorifying the Founding Fathers, they were human beings, but they had this epiphany, and they put it into the Declaration of Independence, and it became part of the system, and it ended up causing them to lose their slaves. Some of them maybe freed their slaves earlier. Some had that humanitarian side to them. However you explain it, it doesn't really matter. Even if it was against their will, I still find it amazing that they wrote something that would ultimately completely eliminate slave trade. And really, that means slavery on any level. Now, I know there are plenty of other types of slavery today, but we're talking about that legitimizing that you can own another human being and own their freedom of movement and freedom of expression. Another thing I wanted to point out was I find the apologetics of the Founding Fathers in the Declaration of Independence also quite enlightening. They're like almost apologizing, where they say there's a time where people have to make a decision. After being oppressed and overtaxed and discriminated by King George, they have to declare their independence. Like they almost didn't want to do it. They would have done anything. Because nobody wants to just rock the boat. Nobody wants to disrupt and have confrontation. Especially with your host, king. He was respected. But he forced them because of his feeling that type of absolute ownership, absolute power of a monarch. And nobody can question that. They realized that it's never going to allow us to be free. In a book called The New Republic, makes a very interesting case that these freedoms were a result of the Bible being translated into English properly. Because up to that point, essentially, when the first few books of what we call Chumash of the Bible, you have the idea of a king, appoint a king. So people saw it as a biblical mandate, a divine mandate that every country should have a king, a one leader, that had absolute authority. But once the entire Bible was translated, and the story of Samuel, where the Jewish people, the Jewish nation comes to Samuel and they say, we want a king. And Samuel says, what do you need a king? You have God. They say for nationalistic purposes, we want it for our pride, we want to... And he ultimately agrees because God tells him to agree. So suddenly it opened up the eyes of those that read that story. 1 second, that means monarchy is not the only system of government. This is the case he makes, the thesis in the Hebrew Republic, it's called. The Hebrew Republic, that's the name of the book. Also the basis of this country based on that concept. So suddenly they realize there's other forms of government. It doesn't have to be with one authoritative king. Another insight. Bottom line, my friends, July 4th is really, if you think about it, again, beyond the commercialization and all the externals, and the barbecues and the different things people do, the official beginning of summer vacation, it has in it a message of honoring the single most important thing of life. Your dignity, your value, your indispensable value. And everything is rooted there. When you are indispensable, when you matter, then your decisions matter. Your choices matter. Your life matters. It's not negligible. It's not arbitrary. It's not insignificant. It's not subjective. It absolutely matters on a cosmic level. You matter now and forever. Your actions matter. And that's essentially what was established. Now, obviously, dealing with the politics of a country, it translates in more political, economic terms. But if you think about it, it's a very spiritual and psychological insight, a spiritual and psychological foundation, I should say, to what defines life. And that is a celebration of each one of us. That yes, we are all created equal and endowed by the Creator with inalienable rights. I looked up inalienable, unalienable rights that cannot be taken from you because it was not given to you by anyone. It comes from the Creator's, your birthright, by very virtue of your existence. Now, there's much more to say, I'm sure, on July 4th, but I think the soul of July 4th, therefore, is about your soul and my soul and its ultimate value and how that spills over into relationships, into interactions, into our daily routines in so many ways, because it elevates it all to a transcendent state, not just a survival mode, but transcendent mode in which we can thrive and grow and spread our wings and be the best we can possibly be and beyond. Thank you so much. Happy July 4th, Independence Day. True independence is not just you can do whatever you like. True independence means you're not encumbered. You're not bound by someone else imposing themselves upon you. That you can be yourself in the fullest sense of the word. So happy July 4th. This is Simon Jacobson. MeaningfulLife.com is our website. Please subscribe to our offerings, to our growing YouTube channel. Please share. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, your feedback, your comments. Be well and be blessed and have a very beautiful summer. Thank you.